So I have with me today Alexander Smuckler, who has a very long history of not only being from the former Soviet Union, but also working on behalf of the community. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and shalom from New Jersey. I'm in New York area right now, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Wonderful.
Regarding our activities in the former Soviet Union.
Okay, fabulous. So you are a former refusenik who advocated for the rights of Jews in the former Soviet Union. Some of our listeners are probably too young to even know what that really means. Tell us about that. What does it mean to be a refusenik?
To be a refusenik, yeah, I agree with you. It's very, very hard to explain, especially to the young generation. I even always trying to explain it to my children, and they still can't figure out that what means, what this term mean, refusenik. Refusenik, basically, it's the people. I mean, the people who've been refused to receive an exit visa for their immigration from former Soviet Union, and of course, exit visa to repatriate to Israel, which is the most important. And we've been excluded from any kind of social life after we applied for the exit visa as it was required by former Soviet government during many, many years. And we've been waiting this exit visa for years. During that time, we were not allowed to, basically, we had no chance to find any job based on our profession or education. All of us had to find a job which was very low level, working as a security guards or gardeners, or I personally work as a chess teacher, private chess teacher. So it was very difficult time for thousands of people who've been refused to emigrate from Soviet Union and participated in the movement for the freedom of immigration from Soviet Union. So we called ourselves refuseniks.
So do you have a story?
Or in Russian, it's called отказники.
Ah, okay, great. Thank you. So do you have a story that will maybe open people's eyes to what it was to be a Jew in the Soviet Union back then? I mean, you spoke about what it is to be a refusenik, but what was day-to-day life like for you?
During the time, you mean during the time when I was a refusenik, or before that?
I would say even right before, before this whole period happened.
I grew up and I was born, and I grew up with very, very assimilated family. My both parents were hardline communists, and basically in my family, I had no clue at all what means to be Jewish. And we never celebrate any holidays. We never followed traditions. I had no idea about Shabbat or Pesach or Hanukkah. They try to hide it from us because they lived in Soviet Union with the great fear that if they will follow traditions, as, for example, my grandparents did, sometimes they will lose their jobs and their lifestyle will be their lifestyle. They will not be able to maintain the lifestyle which they wanted. So my parents really did not educate us at all about what means to be Jewish. And at the age of 18, I went to Crimea with my parents. I was a senior at the high school, 10th grader. And in the summer, we went to Crimea, the little village called Koktebel, and I suddenly meet people on the beach wearing Magen David, and I was shocked and amazed, and I asked my parents, "What does it mean? Why they?" Of course, I knew what Magen David is because I've seen it before, and I understand that they identify themselves bravely, identify themselves as a Jews, and that was the beginning of my um, long way back to Jewish tradition, to my roots, because I tried to do everything possible to meet with these people and talk with them, and it brought me to the movement. And I remember that happened in the summer of 1978. Uh, of course, after the years, I learned and from them and from other people that every year in the summer, a group of Hebrew teachers organized by Yuli Kasharovsky and Yuli Edelstein, they came to Crimea and conducted diburim on the mountains in the summer camps, and during the daytime they were visible on the beach. So that's how I came to the movement.
Such an incredible story. Now, you know, especially hearing the word Natan Sharansky and Yuli Edelstein being among the teachers. Now, you moved for your...
Not Natan. Natan was not my teacher. Of course, he is a very dear friend and a mentor. But my teacher was Yuli Kasharovsky, Yuli Edelstein, and Michael Nekrasov.
Amazing. Now,
my Hebrew teachers.
You moved to the United States eventually, as you know, you're living now, and it was in 1991. And you became heavily involved in activism then on behalf of the Jews from the former Soviet Union. Share your most memorable stories from that time.
Since I moved to the United States?
That period in 1991 when you came over, and right away, from what I understand, you became an active activist on behalf of the Jews still living in the Soviet Union at the time.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I end up being in the United States, it's because I left already in 1991. It was just a few months before Soviet Union collapsed, and and of course we always been prepared to go to Israel. We received actually our permission to immigrate in early 1990. After almost 10 years of waiting exit visa, because first I applied for the immigration August 3rd, 1980, first time, and I was waiting. And after that, my wife joined me. We married in 1982, and we reapply again. And I was getting the refusal to immigrate because of the state secrecy of my parents. That was the first reason, because they both used to work in the Soviet in the Soviet secret scientific institutes, but I never did. And because of them, I also had they refused me to emigrate because of their state secrecy. In addition to that, my parents refused for many years to sign a permission for me to immigrate, which in that time was required by the Soviet government. So I received the exit visa and permission to immigrate during the Gorbachev time in early 1990. But in that time already, I started, the perestroika allowed us to start businesses. And by the 1991, I already had a pretty large business and a company which was involved in the coal trading, and with the headquarters in Rotterdam and Brussels.
Wow.
And also the company had an office in New York, and they offered me to relocate to New York to work there. For me, I decided that it's a temporary move before going to Israel. So I used that chance, and that's how we end up in New Jersey. in
So I
Montclair.
want to take just a quick jump to, to be able to make sure for the sake of time that we're able to address some of the more, the additional questions. And one of the things that I know happens, from that time in the late 1980s to the early 1990s, is that when the Soviet Union fell, we got into the post-Soviet period, it really was that the Jewish community went from nothing, as you said, you grew up with no Judaism, with zero, to really having a number of Jewish organizations working in the region. I understand you were involved in that as well, including work with the Eurasian Jewish Congress. Can you just give me an idea of how does that happen? How do you go from zero to so many Jewish organizations?
Yeah, before I left the Soviet Union, I was a part and a member of so-called steering committee, which was, we called it Mashka. It's a steering committee, a group of Jewish leaders who've been really organizing underground Jewish, basically organizing and leading underground Jewish activity in the Soviet Union. And the last chairman of the steering committee during the Soviet time was Mika Chlenov, Dr. Chlenov. And of course, I consider him as one of uh, my oldest and my dearest friend and mentor. And when I end up in United States, I was traveling very often back to Russia in 1991, 1992, 1993. And of course, I've heard about the initiative which was coming from my former friends and colleagues in that steering committee, and basically former members of the Presidium of the Vaad, that they're planning to organize Eurasian Jewish Congress, which, as far as I know, celebrate 30 years of activity very, very soon. And three founders of Eurasian Jewish Congress, Roman Spector, Michael Chlenov, and Yosef Zissels, who lately, Yosef and Chlenov lately became co-chairman of Eurasian Jewish Congress. They organized that body trying to unite and discuss problems which communities on the territory of former Soviet Union and basically Eastern Europe will have after the collapse of Soviet Union. I think it was a great idea. I fully supported it. And when lately I became president of National Coalition supporting Eurasian Jewry, of course, we've been doing our programs and projects in very in cooperation with Eurasian Jewish Congress.
Incredible.
And I think Eurasian Jewish Congress played very important role during the last 30 years in community development in the former Soviet republics and Eastern Europe, especially protecting Jews from different anti-Semitic waves, and helping people to emigrate and repatriate to Israel. So that work was absolutely outstanding.
So let me ask you this. I mean, today we have a war going on between Russia and Ukraine, and I'm wondering from your perspective, is the Jewish community doing enough in order to help the situation as it's going on now? It's especially interesting giving your perspective from what you've been through in the past.
You mean the Jewish communities or Eurasian Jewish Congress?
I would say the Jewish community in North America, where you're living today.
Listen, it's extremely complicated issue, and we're all having such pain that today the Jewish communities of Ukraine and Russia are separated, and it's such a painful issue, because I know that some of the members of the Jewish community in Russia now are supporting the Russian aggression in Ukraine. At the same time, we know that Jewish community in Ukraine, including their leadership, and my friend Yosef Zissels and Pavel Feldblum and Yakov Bleich and Rabbi Kamenetsky, they're doing everything possible to help Jews who still remain in Ukraine today uh, simply to survive during such brutal war. My concern is I have a very complicated feelings about this conflict sitting here in New York. On one hand, I do understand that probably it's the last page of the Jewish history in Ukraine and Russia. And I do believe that most of the Jews will finally stake in a line to get Israeli citizenship, and they will end up in Israel very soon. It will take time, maybe several months. I know that Jewish Agency and Natif are working so hardly to accommodate everybody who are seeking place to survive and live, and who are trying to emigrate right now to Israel. And I know that the thousands of people are fleeing out of Russia, and especially, of course, from Ukraine. All my friends, especially from Russia, right now relocated to Israel and started a new life there. So I do believe, with the understanding that the golden age of Russian Jews is over. I don't believe that the Jewish community will be so vibrant and active after that war until the political situation in Russia will be changed. At
That
the
makes
same
sense.
time, at the same time, I do understand that Israel has such a, politically has such a difficult and complicated time, because Israel is like between two stones. On one hand, Israel is uh, cannot actively support Ukraine, including sending weaponry and lethal weaponry and sophisticated missiles or anti-aircraft um, systems to Israel and support them from military point of view, because that will raise a risk that Russia will close its borders for the Jews who are trying to immigrate right now. And the cooperation between Russia and Israel is so also important in in direction of the situation in Syria and Hezbollah, and of
Right.
course the situation in Iran.
Of course.
Uh,
So, I don't want to, I hate to cut you off, but just because, again, of the
sure,
sake of time,
I
it's,
understand.
and I know it's so interesting, but it's,
I
uh-huh.
just want to add one very important issue. Being here in New York, for example, I just recently published the interview with the Jewish Standard, because also, yes, we do understand the suffer of not only Jews but the Ukrainians during that war. But at the same time, supporting the Ukraine is very, very hard for us, especially because the pattern of the Ukrainian voting in the United Nations. Not many people knows that during last 2 months, Ukraine twicely vote to support anti-Israel resolutions in the United Nations,
Right, that's
and
true.
it's very known. Most of the American Jewish leaders condemn that resolutions, and I have a question. Of course, when we talk about supporting the Ukraine, I have a question to Jewish president of the Ukraine: why the Ukraine is keep voting in the United Nations supporting anti-Israel resolutions?
Well, it's a
That's
good
what I
point.
wanted to.
Yeah, it's a
For
good,
me, it's a very important issue.
yeah, very good point to end on for sure. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Smuckler. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today and get your insight into the history, the present, and I guess we're going to wait and see what happens in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and Liatot.